Folks, I want to highlight an Arkansas business. I want to first introduce you to a guy by the name of John Miller. John's on the line with us now. He is the owner of the Riverside Cafe in Lake City, Arkansas. John, how are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing fantastic. So I wanted to have you on first. Talk about your business, Riverside Cafe. How long you been doing it, and what kind of led up to this moment?
Well, we've only been here a few months. We started in July. I've been in Jonesboro for a little bit and wanted to make a change. My dad and I are together in the business. Both of us have been in corporate restaurants for a long time. Just kind of got disenchanted with how we didn't get to work directly for our customers. So we wanted to go off and do something on our own that was a little less about shareholders and a little more about people that we actually interact with every day.
That's good. That's really good. Now, the reason I got your information was because, I think we have a mutual friend in State Representative Dan Sullivan. So, you guys were talking about maybe some of the issues that are important to constituents, and he was like, hey, I need to, connect, introduce the two of us, and that's another reason why I wanted to have you on the program. But let me ask you this. What did you think? I know you live in Lake City, but what do you think about, the tax policy pushing for sales tax increases and things like that? How does that go over well with you as a business owner?
Well, actually, I live in Jonesboro, so it was a little closer to home for me. Usually when you want more of something, you subsidize it, and when you want less of something, you tax it. So tax and sales doesn't seem to be the best way to increase. That's what Dan and I talked about. There's not much emphasis on local business in Jonesboro or in Arkansas in general. I mean, think about trying to bring in these companies from China and send money back to China. It doesn't stay in Arkansas. It doesn't stay in your local economy. It doesn't turn over. So it gets taxed one time and it's gone. Whereas if it stayed in the state, stayed in the city, then you collect that sales tax on that same dollar 3 or 4 times.
So what's the difference? Let me ask you this. What's the difference with like a local business, okay, versus a business that's, maybe a franchise, something that's like maybe more like a national chain? What's the difference there?
Well, a franchise, even a locally owned franchise, is going to pay a franchise fee directly out. So 10 to 15 cents of every dollar leaves automatically. With a corporate restaurant, it's going to be even more, corporate anything really. Whereas in a local economy, it's owned by local people. It's going to be local employees. Typically, local businesses pay higher wages. So all that money stays there. Those dollars are getting spent over and over in that economy. Does it make more sense to get 2% of a dollar that goes away, or 1% of the same dollar 4 or 5 different times?
Good morning.
I see your point there. Now that's very interesting. So I mean, this kind of hits home. I mean, when local governments are saying, hey, we want to raise sales taxes on the people. I mean, that essentially is going to get passed on to consumers, right? I mean, that's well, I mean, the sales tax is what it is. So you're saying that this is somehow harmful to maybe small town businesses, because that's kind of like the opposite of what we heard in the past.
I think it's harmful to all businesses. We hear on and on about the tariffs on China and how that's going to make us pay more money for what we buy. Well, how can that be? If it's a tax on China, China's going to pass it on to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Corporate taxes, corporations don't pay taxes. That passes through the consumer. But when you increase sales taxes, then maybe the incentive to come to Jonesboro to buy something is a little less than what it was. When we were passing the internet sales tax, how often do we hear it? Main Street businesses can't compete with this hurdle that the online retailers don't have. Well, the most effective way would be to eliminate the tax, I think. But obviously, if it's that much of a detriment to your local businesses, lower it. Just lower it altogether.
Interesting.
So you're
Go ahead, John.
Well, you got the laugher curve, but obviously the argument is that we're on the wrong side of it. That we've reached a point where it's not worthwhile to pursue that avenue. So obviously the tax is too high.
Well, so let's just talk about it. So a lot of times local governments, and we saw this, you see this a lot of places, they like to compare their sales tax rates with other cities. And if their sales tax rate is lower than other cities, they seem to think that that's a bad thing, that they're somehow missing out. There was even a opinion piece in the Jonesboro Sun a couple of days ago saying, because their sales tax increase push failed, that, Jonesboro will continue to be one of the cheapest places to live in Arkansas. And they say that that's fine if you're only looking at your utility bill, but it's not fine if you care about your kids and grandkids. That's not my argument. That was their argument. So what do you think when cities kind of start to look around at other cities and they're like, hey, we want some parity and we're missing out on wealth we could be getting from our citizens?
Did your parents ever give you the argument that if everybody else jumped off the cliff, would they do the same thing?
Of course they did, yes.
Every situation is unique. And you can't just say that because this city has higher sales tax, this city has a pool, or this city has that. You have to look at a lot more factors than that. Jonesboro, to be a city of its size, average income is actually pretty low. And I think that bears a point in what we can support financially that way. If we pass a sales tax, but it makes the cost of living unaffordable for a lot of people, then we're no better off than what we were, and arguably worse, because what's the number one driving factor of crime, supposedly, is poverty, right? So let's make things a little harder on people, because somewhere else that has a totally different situation can afford a higher sales tax rate. Maybe. I mean, we come up with that comparison to Fayetteville quite a bit, but Washington County seems to be in a little bit of a budget crisis to the point that they're not giving raises or hiring new employees.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they can't really support that sales tax either.
That's interesting thought, and I haven't ever, actually heard this perspective, at least articulated the way that you're doing. We had people in this last push to increase the sales tax, they were saying to my surprise, publicly, in public meetings, that, hey, listen, you mentioned poverty. They were saying we've got too many, $300, $400 a month rent houses. So, and that we just can't have that anymore because that's what's driving the crime. And I thought that was an interesting opinion, that somebody's saying the way to, to end this in partly is to give more money to fire and police, but also kind of attempt to price people out of the community. I'm not really sure if that would work anyway. I don't agree with that. It comes across as extremely elitist. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and it won't work. My wife's an RN. I've got a good job. We've been married for 10 years. When we first started out, right after we got married, he was just out of school. We didn't have a lot of money. We lived in one of those $300, $400 a month apartments, and it allowed us to get on our feet, get together, buy a house, have our children, that kind of stuff, and become productive members of society. There has to be a starting point for everybody. You just can't draw a blank line and say, well, this low-cost housing is a problem, and I don't like it. You may not like it, but it's hard to get ahead in the world, and you got to start at the bottom.
So
you have to have those kind of things.
Let me ask you this. Again, we're talking with John Miller, and by the way, he's the owner of the Riverside Cafe, and I have had, I'm pretty sure, John, I've eaten at, I know when you were back in Jonesboro, your food is excellent, because I've had some of it before. You live in the city limits of Jonesboro, so, I'm assuming just based on what you're talking about, you were not necessarily supportive of this tax increase, and so I'm just curious, what do you think needs to happen moving forward? There are people that, are saying, listen, we definitely have a crime problem, and we need to do something about that. What do you think the answer is?
I think the first thing that we could look at is we've got a whole host of brand new taxes. We've got an internet sales tax now. We don't know what it's going to be. We know it's going to be more than what it was. I think that if we can ordinance that, go directly to police and fire, give it a few years, see what it's going to work out at, and then come back and determine what the needs are going to be. Most of the problem that I had with the sales tax proposal is it was just completely non-specific. The idea was pass this tax in 12 years. They thought it was going to bring in about $18 million a year. They were going to borrow against that, which I don't think is a great idea when we're in an unprecedented period of economic growth, and we're in a trade war that's hitting agriculture harder than any other industry, and that's our economic force here. But then it was just for a bunch of projects to be named later. If you're going to do something like that, you just say, this is what we're going to do in phases within what we think the sales tax will bring in. So that way there's some wiggle room if there's a shortfall. It's the same thing with the police and fire. That was supposed to be $18 million a year, so they would have gotten $4.5 million roughly a piece. This is what we're going to do with it in year one. This is what we're going to do with it in year two. So on and so forth down the line, so you have some idea what you're voting on.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. They may not be as dogmatic as I tend to be about, no new taxes. I think you can get people to vote for tax increases locally if you know specifically how the money's going to be spent. And I think that I agree with you 100%. Like that, I think that's the reason it failed, is because you were essentially asking the voters to give people a blank check in terms of where it's going to be spent. Like, we'll find out how we're going to spend it later. And this was in the context of the city running a $5-6 million deficit the year before, and so we knew for sure at least some of this money was going to go to plug that hole. And now, now I understand they're going to put forth some leaner budgets because the tax failed, and you got to think that's a good thing that people. Because we did not reward the government for bad behavior, which, I mean, if you can't balance your budget, clearly something's wrong. If you've got record sales tax revenue, which you do. And I also like your idea, John, about the internet sales tax. This is all coming into local communities now, whether, I didn't support it, but it's all happening. And so if it is, people need to start asking questions about what that increase looks like and why can't that go to public safety. I agree with your idea, John. It's an excellent idea.
I'm not against all taxes. Taxes are necessary. We need a government. We wouldn't if all men were angels, but they're not. So there just has to be some accountability in where it's going. Taxes are constantly increasing, but nothing really seems to get better for anybody. So there needs to be some accountability there. Where does it go? Why do you need it to? Specifically, what are you going to do with it? Even at the state level. We need to fix our roads. Well, which roads? Where's the plan? Which roads need to be fixed? Which roads are okay? I realize that things pop up. There's going to be a lot of construction where the flooding was in the part of the state. But generally, there should be some kind of a plan that you can look at and say, okay, well, this is where that tax went. I see things getting done. And we just don't get that. That's why they can constantly increase it, because it's a vague idea.
Last question. I mean, this is kind of a softball, but I mean, we're talking. By the way, folks, we're talking with John Miller. He's the owner, Riverside Cafe, a joint venture with him and his father. It's in Lake City, Arkansas. If the government, you couldn't run your business the way the government runs its business, could you?
I don't think so. It'd be pretty hard to say we're not making enough, so we need more customers and charge them more. That's under the force of law.
I think exactly under the force of law. That's pretty good. I like that. Hey, well, John, I appreciate you coming on the program. I appreciate you talking to us. And by the way, this is kind of a 2-for-1, because you're a young conservative. Because you are younger than most people that believe like you, and you're also a small business owner. So I just want to tip my hat to you. Thank you for speaking out, and thank you also for taking a risk and creating jobs, and also giving people some good food to eat, sir.
I appreciate what you do too.
All right. Well, hey, I'd love to have you on again sometime. Let's keep in touch, and I'm going to be by there soon to eat some food.
That was great. Have a
Okay.
good day, sir.
All righty. Thank you. That's John Miller, everybody.